If you want to increase your vision and expand it, develop a process for finding more and more and more before. There's a process that will help you to expand that picture and to see it bigger and to see it quicker than you ever have before. And the process, I love this teaching. It's brand new for me. In fact, I'm just exploring this teaching, okay? So you got to understand, you're hearing it first, and it's good, but it's going to be great someday, okay? And when you hear it, when it's really great and you read about it, you say, oh my gosh, I heard it when it was just good, okay? But I call this advance attraction. And advance attraction is this. When you know what you want in the future, okay? It's called advance attraction. When you know what you want in the future, you will attract what you need to help you get what you want. When you know what you want in the future, you will attract what you need to help you get what you want. So if I say to you, and we know this illustration well, if I just say to you, the rest of the day, I want you to see the color blue. Guess what you'll see all day? Blue. You'll see more blue than you've ever thought. You'll say, my gosh, I didn't realize so many people wore blue today. And the carpet and the walls and blue, blue, blue. Now, why? It's because I've now conditioned you, advanced attraction, to look for things that are blue. Well, if you know what you want when it comes to your vision, when you know what you want, see, that's when you'll start to attract to you the things that will help you get what you want. It's not that they haven't been there, it's just you haven't seen them until now. So here's the way this works. Once you know what you want in the future, your mind will help you think of things that will help you get what you want. And your eyes will help you see things that will help you get what you want. And your heart will begin to feel things that will help you get what you want. And your attitude will help you to believe things that will help you get what you want. And your mouth will start to say things that will help you get what you want. And your life will begin to attract things that will help you get what you want. Why? Because you know what you want. Once you know what you want, once you got your vision, once you know where you're going, once you know what that picture looks like, you're going to find all kind of people to put in the picture. You're going to find all kind of resources to put in that picture. But it'll never happen to you until you know what you want. If you don't know what you want, you don't attract anything to you. That's the process. It's called advanced attraction. And the process is, once I know where I want to go, I'm going to find all kind of people who help me get there. And I'm going to get all kind of resources. And it's kind of like this. When you start moving towards your vision, as you move, you attract the resources to you. Are you with me? So what happens? We're moving toward our vision, and we're getting low on resources. And so here's what people do. They stop. They say, oh my gosh, okay, wow. I'm going to have to wait for the resources to come before I start going again. And they don't understand. The stopping stopped the resources. Happens all the time. But the moment they start moving, the resources move too. Resources move as you move. And resources come to you as you need them. But they don't come to you if you aren't moving. Inaction creates no faith, and inaction creates no response. That's why all of my life, I don't mean this unkindly, I basically know what I want, and I start going. And I get people to come into my life that I don't deserve. I get people to come into my life that I don't go after. A lot of people that come in my life, I can't take any credit for going after them. To be honest with you, I'm a person of faith, so I'm not trying to out-faith you here, but God helps me. But he knows that I'm going, see, he honors obedience. And obedience is only understood on the back end. It's not understood on the front end. So the person who says, I'm not going to move on my vision until I can see it all clearly, or I'm not going to, and they stop, what they don't realize is they stopped all the resources of the vision. And they're never going to be available to them until they act it out again. So there's a process. I just gave it to you. And the moment you activate that advanced attraction, all of a sudden, you see things start to come towards you.
We're going to talk about decisions today. We're going to talk about New Year's decisions that you can think about, that you can make, that'll help you this year. So before we get started, I'd love for you to go to maxwellleadership.com/podcast. And as you think about the year 24 and as we move forward, if there's a way that we can help you in executive coaching or facilitation around content, we would love to do that. Well, as we reflect on the year past, we all go through this. We all do it. It's a great exercise to do. You know, we think about what went well, what could we have done better, what did we learn? So all of these lead to then decisions that you have to make. And you're the master behind all this content that we create here. So obviously you've been thinking about some decisions that are on your heart that you wanted to kind of bring a lesson that maybe you've gone through recently over the last couple of weeks as you prepare for 2024. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this one's personal. A bit is that, thinking about, are you going to make New Year's resolutions? Are you going to set goals? I'm a big fan of goals and that sort of thing. But over the last couple of months, I started recognizing in me that, I think I have the best intentions about what I'm going to do and my goal and what I'm trying to accomplish. But I realized that I'll give you an example. Saying, are you going to work out today? And I'm thinking, if I wait until today to make that decision, and I wake up and I get up early and it's cold and it's dark and it's a chance of rain, I tend to make a decision in the moment based on all the circumstances. Yeah. And then this was just about 6 weeks ago. I remember this teaching from John. It's quite a bit in the past, but it really resonated with me then. But I completely pushed it out of my mind. And the teaching was, decide once, manage daily. Decide the big things that you're going to do, and then manage it. You can't make the decision in the day, in the moment. I can't make the decision to work out at 5 a.m. when it's dark and cold and rainy. I need to have made that decision in advance and then manage it today when it's dark and cold and rainy. Same thing I was sharing with you. We travel, and I'm thinking I'm going to only eat salads with, Caesar salad with chicken. And then I've had a tough day. It's been a hard week. I'm on the road, and I get into the restaurant, and now I'm choosing poor choices.
You're looking at the dessert menu to start your dinner.
Bring me the apple pie, then I'll make a decision on the rest of the menu. Yeah. And because what am I comforting myself? Yeah. Whatever. Decide once. If I've decided once I'm going to eat a certain kind of diet, then I can manage it daily. And so no matter how I feel, I've already made the decision. I just need to figure out how I'm going to manage it today based on everything that's going on, all the circumstances, the ups, the downs, the sideways. I just need to manage it. I'm going to manage my, these decisions I need to make. So I thought, first of all, I'll get your thought on that, because I know you've been around John a lot and know this teaching, but also maybe we could look at, in the new year, what are some decisions leaders need to be thinking about that we can make once and then manage them daily throughout the year?
I love that. You mentioned about just being on the road and traveling, right? What I've noticed is that if I don't do this, if I don't make that decision and then have a plan to manage it, man, when we get tired in everything in life, that's when the guard goes down and you're just like, yeah, you know what? I told myself I wasn't going to open the menu, but now we're going to see what do they have. And so I love that, right? Because I think not only, when you got the energy in your A game, you're like, good, I got this. I made this decision. But when you get tired, you got to have something in place that you can manage that.
I'm laughing because you and I were traveling together about, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and you had made a decision that you were going to fast.
Yeah.
But we were with a client, and they were getting all this stuff ready, had all these snacks. They even put you in an office with mounds and mounds of snacks. And they brought in these custom handmade donuts, and everything within your face. And I was so proud of you, because you'd made a decision.
I did.
And then you managed it through the day, unless there was something I didn't see.
Nope.
But you managed it through that day to honor the decision you'd already made.
Yeah.
That's podcast over.
There you go. That's it. Drop the mic. We're out. Have a good year. No, I'm just kidding. Well, let me come back to what you said about John, because John is big about this. John is he calls himself a boring guy. He's like, no, I know what I'm going to be doing, right? And I do it every day. And that's what he says. The secret to your success is determined by your daily agenda. I'll never forget, I've heard him say, if I've heard him say it once, I've heard him say it thousands of times. If I could just spend one day with you, I could tell right away whether or not you'd be a successful person. And what does that daily agenda look like? Because how are you managing your time? How are you managing your choices? And so you got to do it on a daily basis. The other thing I love about what he says is he says that successful people make the right decisions early. They make them early, they make them quick, and then they manage them. So he has this thing called the Daily Dozen. You may, if you're a Maxwellian, as we call you, and you're familiar with John's content, the Daily Dozen is 12 areas that really focus on one's daily routine. Some of them are around attitudes and attitude, priorities, health, family, finances, faith. But we're going to talk a little bit about that and the decisions you make as we go forward.
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified Team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
He really talked about this, making the decision once. I thought, could we look at some areas that might increase our effectiveness as leaders and learn to decide once what it is we want to do in those areas and then manage daily. The 3 areas I just picked out, I'm kind of being, again, a little selfish. This is things I'm looking at me going forward, but I think it applies to all of us, is areas for consideration about you personally. So decisions you need to make about you, about your team, areas that you need to make, decisions you need to make, and maybe about your business. So I'll throw them out and maybe get your feedback on them. But one of the decisions I made under thinking about me was about what do I need to decide about my personal growth. And in the new year, I can't decide, when I get up in the morning, am I going to spend a few minutes I need to decide once and then manage it daily. But what's your thought on deciding once about personal growth?
Yeah, I think what I love about this is, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about this, because I learned this from you in the irreducible minimums. And I know that even an example with your son or someone that is not necessarily motivated every day by personal growth, but know that we want to grow, so let's manage that decision. Talk just quickly, for those that haven't listened to us, we've done an episode of this in the past. Just talk about the irreducible minimum and what that means.
Yeah, the learning was, and I got this for myself first, but then trying to encourage my son on some growth that he was doing, that he needed to do. I said, what are you reading? I don't have time to read. And I thought that sounded like me. And so the irreducible minimum idea is, what's the minimum you could do in an area that you want to grow in that cannot be reduced, the minimum that cannot be reduced, irreducible minimum. And the idea is that I found for myself, I love to set big goals. Tell you what, I'm going to read 12 books in 2024. Well, that's a big leap if you're reading 0 to get to 12. So instead of making a goal that's so large you probably won't do it, set a goal that's so small you'd be embarrassed not to do it. And so instead of having 12 books, I'm going to say, could I read 2 pages a day, every day? And the magic of this is the everyday. And as John would teach, that it's consistency that compounds over time.
Yeah.
My life motto became small things done daily, consistently, over time, remarkable results. Small things done daily, consistently, over time, remarkable results. So if you can figure out what the small things you could do, just decide, I'm going to do 15 minutes. I'm going to manage it tomorrow. 15 minutes, I'm going to read something. But personally, I'm going to read something for business, and I'm going to write something. For me, that was kind of mine.
I love that. No, and do it in a way, by the way, that fits your wiring. Right? Let me say this, right? Some people are like, you know what? I'm going to get up at 5 every morning, and I'm going to work out, or I'm going to do my 15 minutes. You might not do that if you're a night night person versus a morning person, right? And my wife and I have this conversation. I'm a morning person, but I'm worthless after 10 o'clock, right? She is a night person, gets a lot of stuff done, but doesn't do well in the mornings. And so we talk about this as your personal growth. Like, when do you schedule it in the day? You schedule in the day that it fits your wiring in order to continue to have success.
Another decision, I think, for you on the topic of you that you need to make once and manage daily is this idea about your physical fitness, your health. I know you've made some commitments on that and you're following that as a regimen. This is one of the comfort areas. I had a knee surgery this year, and it's kind of set me back, and I've let that be a circumstance that I could still. Now I'm making it every day when I get up. Well, my knee hurt today. No, I need to have made it once just to manage it within the fact that my knee is hurt. It's cold, dark, and rainy. How am I going to handle today's physical fitness? But your thoughts?
I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago with an executive, and we were talking about this. I saw his personal board as I went into it was awesome, right in his office. He's like, here's my family and my family and personal goals for this year, which was, last year. And one of them was, weight loss, and he was tracking it, and he just has it out there for everybody. I was like, oh, tell me about that. So we started talking, and he's like, he said, I decided that I wanted to make a decision, and then I needed to walk every single day. And I know you big, tracking your steps and all this kind of stuff. And he said, man, what I found was the commitment that I made to this, then I had more energy. It reduced my stress, right? But I had to have it scripted, and I had to have a plan so I could manage when I was tired. And the plan was this: in the world of all of these Zoom meetings, he tried to get out as many Zoom meetings as he possibly could, and went back to the good old-fashioned phone. Uh-oh. And he would put his headphones on, and he would walk in all of his meetings. Right. The day his greatest steps he had was 52,450 steps. And I was like, say that number again. I think the most I've ever had is in the 20s. And that's probably when I was on vacation, right? Doing a tour. And so he's like, no, I made a decision that any meetings that I can move. And when I have those meetings, that's my trigger. That's how I manage. I get up and I go walk. And he said, if the weather's bad outside, I get on my treadmill and I walk. And so he's like, I don't feel like it every day, which leads me to this phrase that I've used and have lived by for a while. With my kids, even with me, it's like, hey, you can't feel your way into acting. So back to this example, I can't feel my way into going, oh, okay, I have a meeting where I am on the phone, I'm going to go walk. No, you'd already made that decision. And so what you got to do is make sure you act on how you manage that. And then, oh, by the way, once you get started, this, once you get started walking around, man, I feel like this is great. I want to keep doing that. So anyways, absolutely need to figure out how to do that.
Let's move the topic to things about leading your team and are the decisions you need to make once and manage daily. The first one I would throw out would be determining proper priorities for the team and for yourself. But if you're not clear on what the priority, decide once what the priorities are and then manage daily how to execute those priorities. I get in trouble when I wake up and start to think, well, what's important today? I need to already know what's important today and then manage it today. Yeah.
When it comes to this, I will sometimes use percentages of time. Sometimes I'll use lists, but none of this happens. Let me back up just a minute. None of this happens unless you're being very intentional about meeting and connecting and communicating with your team. And so what I want to encourage everybody is, as you look through this, is to make sure that you guys have proper alignment in your priorities, is to communicate them back and forth periodically. Hey, what do you think your top 3 priorities are? Hey, what percentage of time are you spending on this? We have an initiative right now at Maxwell Leadership where one of the things, it's a big priority for us. And so my mantra is 70% of your time should be thinking about implementing or whatever around this idea. If it's not, let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk about it, because I want to make sure that we're managing your time and 70% of it is focused on this. And that's kind of the mantra that we're using. And so absolutely, I think it's important when it comes to that.
Decision 4, which would be the second one under managing the team, I think that you should decide once and manage daily how you are going to build relationships and connect with people on your team. I guarantee you when you wake up in the morning and get to work, you are going to be highly distracted, highly pushed. There's going to be lots of things coming at you. If you haven't decided that connecting and relationships are important, and manage it throughout the calendar of the day and the week, it's not going to get done. And you're going to end up at the end of a period, a month, a quarter, the year, and figure out why my team is so distant, why I'm not connected. So I need to figure out how I'm going to manage that daily.
One of my things I love to do is talk about college football. And I have a guy on my team who, man, it's just been something that we've done for a long time. We get together and just catch up in college football and whatnot. And because my schedule has kind of gotten a little crazy, we haven't done it. And so I literally looked at my calendar and I was like, okay, that's it. And so I was very intentional about how do I manage this, right? How I manage it, to your point, I'm just going to put it on the calendar. So I found the first available day, put it on the calendar, and I made the decision. I needed to re-engage. I needed to re-engage around that. We have a lot of fun doing it. And so in order to help me manage that, one of the systems that I put in place is to just go ahead and put it on the calendar and block it out and protect it. So there are little things like that I think you can do, but it's so important to make sure that you're doing that, even with your people things, right? Even with that connecting, just go ahead and schedule it on your calendar.
It's great.
Even if it's just the management by walking around, right? I know we've shared some leaders that they just don't do well with that, so they put it on their calendar at the certain time. Get up for 15 minutes, go walk around, see what's going on. It may be painful for them, but they manage it, and that's how they work through it.
But what's cool is that by you putting it on the calendar, you've already made the decision. This is important. Now, could something happen on the day with that? Yes, and you have to but you won't cancel. You'll reschedule because now you're managing it in the day, not trying to decide how am I going to get it into my day. I'm going to manage it in my day because I've already decided it's important. Let's transition to the final one about leading your business. Are there some decisions you could make once, manage daily? One of them I suggested was modeling. How am I going to model the core values of my organization daily? I think this is another one that I get into the rush and hustle of the day, and then I may just run right through some stop signs that my core values would say we shouldn't do. But if I'm clear, I'm committed to, I'm making a decision on the core values, how am I going to manage those in the rush and hustle of my day?
Yeah, remember, what you do speaks so loudly that your team can't even hear what you're saying. And so you need to make sure that you are living those out on a daily basis. One of the things that I try to do is I try to use it in my language.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like one of ours is exceeding expectations. And if I see something, either a team member has done peer-to-peer, or maybe team has done for the client or whatever, I will say, hey, man, I loved when you exceeded expectations right here. Or growth is one of ours. Hey, man, I see so much growth in you. So for me, the way that I go about it daily is try to use our core values in my common language that I use throughout the day. I'll do it in presentations, and I just try to kind of put it in there. I don't always remember what our core values are right off the top of my head. So what do I do to help me with that? I made the decision I want to do this. So I actually have a little card that sits right next to my computer screen that I can see it, that then goes, oh, yeah. No, I said I want to do this, and I'm going to use this in my language. And so let me use this when I communicate to X, Y, and Z, as long as it's authentically tied into something that's happening. But I try to use that in my common language.
Finally, a second one under leading the business, I said that leaders must make a decision to communicate the vision daily or on a regular basis. I think if I try to get into the day and I haven't decided, what is the vision, how am I going to communicate that, it kind of comes haphazard. I'm not clear. And so I think I'm going to decide once. I'm going to really figure out how to communicate the vision and then manage it daily through the rush of business to get that vision in front of people's eyes and ears.
And let me just add to that, because I think you said it extremely well. Make sure that as you do that, you connect what they're doing to the bigger vision that you're communicating. You're communicating the vision of that team while you're also communicating the vision of the organization, which they should be in alignment. Help them connect those dots. That's the key to that, is making sure that you're thinking about, hey, how does what Jake does right here on our podcast align with the fact that we want to make sure that everyone deserves to be led well? What does that mean, right? It's because we're going out to millions of people because of what they're doing. And so how do you communicate that and then make sure that you tie that together? Well, as we wrap up today, on these decisions, we all have decisions we have to make. And you're listening to this, you've already made some New Year's resolutions, as they call them here. And so you made that decision. You made that choice. Now, how are you going to manage that on a daily basis? because that's how they end up failing. That's how they end up slipping away. That's how they get to a point to where you and I are on the road and we're tired. And you know what? I'm like, I'm not having a chicken salad right now. I'm going to have the biggest burger and fries and milkshake that you could possibly have. Little things that we do lead to big things. And as Perry mentioned in just a little while ago, he said from John Maxwell, consistency compounds. And so, man, we just got to do the little things on a daily basis extremely well.
I have the best of intentions,
yes.
but when I get into the rush of the moment, the hurry of the day, the need for comfort, whatever it is my excuse may be, I've not made that. I'm making decisions on the fly. It's not good. Well, thank you, Chris, for the insights.
In my book, Put Your Dream to the Test, I will promise you this. If you have a dream and you're serious about achieving it, this is a book that you want to have. Because in this book, I ask 10 questions, and the more yeses you can say to the questions I ask, the greater the odds are that you'll fulfill that dream and that you'll be able to answer that significant question, which I'm about to talk about. But before I do, 10 questions. If you can say yes to maybe one, perhaps just two, the odds are quite high that you'll never reach your dream. But if you can learn these questions and build them into the reason why you're pursuing your dream, think of what this will do for you, or think about what this would do for your team if you coach a group of people. What would happen if you put your dream to the test and you sat down together as a team and went through all 10 questions and put a yes or a no behind each question to see how valid your dream is? I close with a significant question because I think it's the most rewarding of all the questions. You see, we were created to help one another. We were created to make a positive difference in people's lives. When people ask me, John, why at your age are you still in the game? It's because I'm trying to add value to you. I'm answering the significant question. People say, John, why are you motivated? Well, what motivates me is you. I'm motivated the fact that you're learning, that you're growing, that you're getting better, that you're taking a book like Put Your Dream to the Test, and you're not only reading it, but you're practicing it, and then you're sharing it with your team. You see, the reason I'm in the game is not for me, it's for you. In fact, your success and significance is much more rewarding than my own personal success or significance. Why? Because I'm a leader. What does a leader do? Leaders add value to others, because they have, first of all, learned how to do it themselves. So I'm adding value to you. Put your dream to the test. 10 questions you ask yourself to find out if you have a valid dream. I would encourage you, get the book, start asking the questions, bring your team around you, and I promise you this, that dream that you've had will become a little closer to reality.
I agree. And I love when he talks about having a hunger that makes us stretch. And when you hear someone in their 70s talking about having a hunger, it's inspiring to me to want to continue to have a hunger all the way through. And I love the word that he kicks off this podcast with, and when he talks about the vitality that growth brings, because I don't think we tend to think, well, maybe it's just me, but I don't think we think of vitality in your 70s. I mean, what are we kind of programmed to think of? You hit a certain age, 62, 65, whatever it is, that you retire. But vitality in your 70s of growing still, that just reshapes our brain to think we never want to be someone who stops growing, certainly as our mentor. And he has given us 3 words that are essentials for growth. And we want to kick it off with confidence. And I've got a question about you and a question about your team when it comes down to confidence. And at this stage in your personal leadership journey, Mark, what are you learning personally about confidence right where you're at today in your leadership journey?
Well, I think as John talked about today is the importance of confidence. A great leader without confidence doesn't do great things. In fact, it's when we lose our confidence that we tend up. John talks often, Tracy, you've heard him say this, podcast family, you've heard him say this. He says, I'm one step away from stupid. And aren't we all? I mean, isn't that true? All of us are sitting here, oh man, yes, I am one podcast away from stupid. I'm just one channel of listening to the wrong podcast that's going to send me on a wild goose chase. We're one decision away from stupid. I think when we lose our confidence, we edge closer to that step. Because we begin scrambling, we lose our way, we lose our sense of certainty, and then we begin to grasp and we begin to try to find something that will help us gain our confidence back. And I've just watched a lot of people, you've heard of liquid courage, referred to people that overdrink and they get a lot more confident when they're inebriated. And it's true, I've seen them. I've seen liquid courage work. But I'm going to tell you that there is a confidence factor that when a leader knows, when a communicator knows that they have something to share, it makes them more believable. It makes them more it makes people follow them better. So I distill it down to a great question and just go, what am I learning? And it is the significance of confidence. I remember when I first started communicating on John's stage, did a lot of communication many, many years ago, but I began communicating on John's stage and I'm going, that's a big microphone to hold, Tracy. You've held that microphone before. That's a big spotlight to stand in. That's big shoes to fill. And I can remember walking into those rooms, walking on those stages, my knees trembling, and my content wasn't as bad as it sounded because of confidence. I remember the other day, I was speaking at something, and I don't think my content was that good, to be honest with you, but people raved about the way I said what I said because confidence is contagious. And so I would tell you that confidence is contagious, confidence is imperative, and yet confidence can be lost in difficult times when nothing's changed except the situations around you that are beyond your control. Can you keep confidence even when circumstances are beyond your control? And it is a hard handle. It's a hard thing to hold on to when things are spiraling out of control.
And so what do you do? The follow-up question before I get to your team confidence question is, what are some things that you do to maintain that confidence when you are on John's stage and you're holding his microphone and it's a situation where it feels spiraling out of control? What is it that keeps you anchored in confidence when you feel a little shaky?
The first thing that I've got to say is you borrow somebody else's confidence. I've looked at people often that's doing something for the first time and I go, hey, I have enough confidence for the both of you. Borrow mine. You're going to be fine. There is just this figurative and yet literal hand on the shoulder that just says, hey, borrow mine. It's going to be fine. Now, when you tell somebody that to do something that's very hard for them, that they don't have confidence in, and you say, borrow mine, you've got to circle back and tell them what you enjoyed and why you have the confidence. Because they're just going to think you're giving them a pep rally before you jump on stage or before you jump into a leadership environment. There is a lot of intentionality has got to be put into extending somebody borrowed belief. And when you can do that, that's the biggest the biggest thing that I do to help myself with confidence or to help others. The second thing that I would say, though, Tracy, is I think it's a little bit of what John said here when he says confidence stimulates creativity that discovers answers. I'm always looking for answers. It's back to that hunger that you mentioned at the top of the show. I'm always hungry for answers, for lessons, for something to take away. And I've discovered that even when I don't do well, speaking, whatever I'm doing, when I don't do well, if I can walk away with a takeaway, all is well in my world. Because the win is in getting an answer that will make me better down the road.
I think that is so great. So that ties into two things. John said, a confident leader gives people confidence. So that is lending your confidence to someone else and getting that from someone else when you feel a little shaky. But what is key there is rather than being in a moment where you walk off stage or you leave a presentation or you leave a moment where you feel a little shaky, and instead of circling the drain and beating yourself up with negative thoughts and, oh, I just blew that, that was terrible. The flip is if you can train your brain as a leader to, instead of going negative and going down and beating yourself up, instead remaining hungry for growth. How can I get better? Tell me where I could have done better. If you stay in that hungry space, you're going to grow forward. You're going to fail forward to the next time, and you'll be able to do it better rather than just shutting down. And I think that's a key. That hunger is a huge piece of growing forward and not just going downward, looking down and just seeing where you missed the mark. I think that's a huge piece of it. And it leads right to my question about your team. Is confidence something that you attempt? I know you said that you try to lend your confidence to someone else, but if you have a team member or several team members that struggle with confidence, is that something that you attempt to grow in your team? Or is, if you've got, I've had team members before who were so capable, but they struggled with confidence, and that can be a real game changer. And at what point do you stop attempting to grow it in them? Or is it something that you attempt at all? Is this something that you can grow?
Well, as a leader, believing in somebody, if you've lost confidence in them and you feel like you have taught them all the confidence that they got, I think there's two major flags that I see in that. Number one, you can't trust somebody that you don't have confidence in. You can't. If you've lost your confidence in somebody, there's no way they're going to gain confidence if you've lost confidence. So then the question is, how do you help them build the trust/confidence back up in your working relationship? So the first thing that I would say is you can never lose confidence in someone. You've got to continue. If you keep them empowered in a position, you've got to keep believing and you got to keep loaning. That's called leadership. The second thing that I would say is there is a thin line, isn't there, between confidence and being comfortable. We get confident often in the predictability, and then it's not good because growth guarantees change. The only way to guarantee success tomorrow or better tomorrow is growth today, and growth is going to have change. So if our confidence really is being comfortable, we're not stretching that teammate enough. So I think instilling and providing borrowed confidence to teammates is an infinite job of a leader. You've got to constantly be doing that, because the day you're not believing in them, you got a problem. The day that you believe that you don't have to share with them anymore because they're comfortable or confident, then probably chances are you've allowed them to get comfortable.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's really good. Okay, let's move on to number 2, the second essential, which would be courage. And he kicks it off by saying that courage is the willingness to let go of the familiar. And I would believe that's what stops a lot of people, is the willingness to let go of the familiar. When it makes me think of on the playground, when you're on the monkey bars and you can't move on until you let go of the bar before you reach for that next bar. And so why do you think, in your opinion, in your experience, in what you've seen with the teams that you've led, why do you think it is so difficult for a leader to let go of the familiar? And then how do you guide a leader, maybe it's even in yourself, to know when it's time to let go versus when do you know how to just call it versus when do you know when to hang on just a little bit more because you're just around the corner from a breakthrough? So many times people stop just when they were just about to have a breakthrough. They stop too soon. So when do you know when it's too soon to let go? And when do you know when to hang on just a little bit longer because a breakthrough is about to happen?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and it speaks to the certainty that we want from leadership. We want leaders to say, after 3 months, after 3 attempts, after 3 opportunities, boom, you're going to have it. And yet courage doesn't work that way. In fact, I would tell you this: using courage and staying in the game is going to take you longer than you thought, and it's going to cost you more than you thought. So if you want to build a plan around when that person has the courage to move forward, add some time to it. Whatever you think it is, add some time to it. And by the way, probably going to have to add some more time to it. Because it's true that while everyone wants certainty, we can't offer certainty. There are some times we just simply don't know. What we can do is offer clarity of the next step. We can say that there is a great next step, but I don't know the final step. And here's what I have found, Tracy, is in training and helping people lead and lead from a place of courage. I have found that the process, the personal process that people go through to establish courage is how courage is established, not some 3 steps and a assignment. It's really the act of staying the course and staying in there longer than you thought and not giving up when you felt like giving up. I've got so many leaders right now that is speaking into me on the power of the journey and the power of the discipline and the tenacity in the journey. They don't give me the solutions that said after 18 months for me, it'll be 20 months for you. And they never give that. They give words like tenacity, stay in the course, being committed, staying longer than you thought, paying more than you thought. And I think that's the answer is, are you so committed to it that you are going to stay the course with great courage to see it through?
I heard a lot of action words in there. I think a lot of people get stalled out and they freeze and they wait while they're waiting for the breakthrough. But the action words that I heard there was the process, the next step, discipline, tenacity, committing, paying more, because it's right in line with John's point where he says life expands or shrinks in proportion to your courage. Courage is in motion. It's not freezing. For those of you who can't see me in YouTube, I'm frozen on screen, but it's not, I think part of knowing that you're being courageous is that you're in action, you're moving, you're still taking steps forward. And that's how life is expanding to see, should you be taking that next step? So that is probably going to help to know if you're ready for the decision-making step, which is number 3. And I love this point, this essential that John talks about, decision making. And I love this because it is a life changer. It really is the summary of a life that John has lived and continues to live. And it is really a guide for all of us. These are a guide in 5 areas that have formed really who John is, decisions that make up the man, the human being that is John. Because really who we are is made up of a bunch of decisions that we've made over and over and over again. And not that we're perfect, but decisions that are in line with what we believe. And so he talks about 5 decisions that he formed in his life. He titled them ministry, personal growth, partnership, relationship, and leadership decisions. Now, I don't think that we all need to give those same exact titles. Those make sense for John's brain. But I think that they are important because they're in line with who he is as a human, as a leader in all aspects of his life. And so I'm curious, Mark, we chatted a little bit before we were rolling just to make sure that I didn't want to catch you off guard. But can you share you are a man who lives a very intentional life, a life that I respect. You're somebody who's, as your friend, as somebody who works closely with you, I can say to our podcast listeners, you're somebody who is the same in a private conversation that you are in public. And I admire you greatly as a friend and as a mentor. And if you could share some of the processes, I'm sure that you haven't, you're in your early 50s. You have not early 50s.
Early 50s. Early.
Can you share some of the processes and decisions so that our listeners can kind of hear what are the decisions that you, Mark Cole, have made that make up you as a human being?
Yeah, so it's interesting because so many of them, Tracy, is John's. And a product of that there's two reasons for that. And probably many of our podcast listeners that listen to John, he finished with this rallying cry, "You are my legs to my legacy. Help me carry the legacy." I feel that same way about all of our podcast family.
Yeah.
You guys are carrying the baton forward. You're carrying the ball forward, and I'm extremely grateful for that. So much like many of you, I've been so influenced and shaped by John that maybe I would have had different words 25 years ago, but it would fit under these categories. So I'm probably using the categories because what was in me now sounds right in the way that John's explained it. The other thing that I would tell you is I don't think it's an accident that John felt like that I was somebody he wanted to ride off in the sunset with. I think there is a shared sense of confidence, courage, decision-making that he and I have. So again, because of those two things, I don't think it's any accident, but let me give you my 5. And the 5th one that I have cracks me up because I love partnerships, but I didn't include partnership in mine. And John loves my 5th one. So I don't think it would not be in his top 5. So anyway, here's they are. One is leadership. I have made a decision that I believe everything rises and falls on leadership. What that means is when things are going awry, when things are going sideways in my team, in my company, my first question is always, what could I have done? What should I do different to make this better? I never look at somebody else. I don't look at the excuse or play the blame game. I always look, number one, at me because everything rises and falls on leadership. Number 2, for me, is significance. Now, John used ministry. I use significance. I believe life is absolutely about others, adding value to others. My 3rd one is relationship. I told you a little bit of this, Tracy. Forgive me if for some of you that don't quite have this frame of reference, but my dad used to always say, Mark, the only thing you can take to heaven with you, the only thing that's going to outlast is going to be people. And so I just, from an early age, I learned the power of relationships. I would probably put John's decision of partnerships under relationships, to be honest with you. And then I too have always been super passionate about personal growth. I'm incredibly passionate about it. It went to the next level being on John's team. And so I'm extremely grateful for that, being on John's team. The final one that I would put, and this is an important one because it was tested, is faith. I made the faith decision. And John says often, a vision that has not been tested cannot be trusted. And I would say a faith that has not been tested cannot be trusted. Many of us grew up in love with our parents' God or our parents' faith. And we never really developed that intentional walk. And what happened to me at 30 is I had to really reconcile, was I going to continue choosing faith, or was I going to let the disappointing faith of others to drive me from a faith of my own? And fortunately, because of the goodness of God, not anything on me, I chose the former. The disappointment of somebody else's faith drove me to get a faith of my own. And I'm extremely grateful for that. So it's a very personal one to me. It doesn't have to be everybody else's, but it's a decision. And so I gauge myself, I talk to myself, I watch myself based off of that decision to really make faith a part of my life.
Well, thank you for sharing those 5 with us. And my action step to our podcast listeners is this. I don't know where you are at in your life. You might be just beginning, or you might be in the stage where Mark and I are at, or you might be where John is. But I encourage you to look back or look forward and make some decisions for your own. The action step for you is, after you listen to this podcast, is maybe using the model of those Mark 5 or John's 5, because Mark's kind of encapsulates John's 5, kind of consolidates some of them, uses different words, different language, but come up begin today to make some decisions yourself of what you want those 5 or 6 or 3, whatever it is that you want your life to stand for, that makes up and describes you as a human, so that as you make decisions in your life, that they can fall under those categories to say, sometimes we make decisions in our life that you think, what should I do? And when you have pre-decided things that you want your life to stand for, it's easy because you run it through that litmus test of what you've already decided for yourself. And then I want you to come back and share it with us, whether it's on our Instagram, Maxwell Leadership Instagram page, or our podcast notes down below, or if you come to YouTube. And we would love to see, and I know I always go through and look at what you've written to us and try to comment and like what you've done, but come back and share with us what they are. We would love to know what they are. Give us some feedback, because we would love to know what your 5 are as you are creating the legacy, not just John's legacy, but your own legacy.
It's funny you mentioned listener comments. I always like to wrap, Tracy, with a listener comment. And so this week's comes from JJ. He listens to the podcast, How Leaders Make the Tough Call. I remember that one specifically. And so JJ, listening to that, we'll include that in the show notes, obviously. But here's what JJ said. He said, Tracy, he's talking to you. He said, Tracy, you've always got the best questions for Mark to get him to open up. And let me go ahead and say what he said. He said, to get him to open up, truly a big part of your gifting. And so, Tracy, I do agree. And JJ, thank you for the comments. I think what JJ is saying is you get me to confess all of my bad leadership stuff with your questions. It's what I think JJ is saying. Hey, seriously, thank you so much. I'm sitting here today with Tracy. And Tracy, I thought about a quote from Patrick Emmington. He said, it's the greatest folly to talk of motivating anybody. The real key is to help others unlock and direct their deepest motivators. And as I'm listening to John today, I thought, how true is it that if you'll just listen to this as that student we talk about, man, there's really some good stuff here on how to motivate yourself and then motivate those around us.
And I agree. And what I think is so cute, let's bookend it. I'll start at the end and come back to the beginning. When John says, go from hype to habit.
Yes.
I thought it was so cute, the story that he started out talking about himself as a 4th grader, and how amazing that when he saw the big boys, as he called them, out on the court. I would think that most kids, now I've had 6 kids, and I would say that most kids, including myself, would see the people out on the court and would practice being called out onto the court by the microphone and to the crowd cheering. And what he saw, even as a 4th grader, was that he needed to, that was the hype. The being interviewed or called out onto the court. It's not interviewed. What is it? Being introduced out onto the court. And what he saw was that he didn't need to practice being introduced onto the court. Even as a young boy, he saw that it wasn't about the hype he needed to practice. He needed to practice basketball so that he could be one of those 5 introduced out onto the court. I thought that was amazing that even as a child, he wasn't drawn to the hype, even though his heart was. He was drawn to the habit that would get him to that position where he would be introduced. I thought that's amazing.
Yeah, that whole comment and then how your play on that reminds me of a great story of Serena Williams, the great tennis star. And she would, right before championship games, she would start thinking about the post-game interview and what she was going to say. She would start envisioning what she would do right after the last shot when she won the championship. Isn't it interesting? And John's thinking about walking out on that stage, and he dribbled out there and then came back, did it 3 times. The coach said, are you going to practice? and so, but these great, it's almost like, don't focus on the pomp and the hype as you're talking about. Focus on the talent, but then focus on how you're going to make the best once you are really talented.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think that both of those stories just really motivate me, how John did that, and then how Serena would spend time thinking about what is going to be her post-championship interview and how's it going to sound, even before she's played in the championship. So I love that. And that's kind of, I think that's applicable to how we as leaders need to be. We need to focus on the disciplines, the habits, and not so much on the hype.
That's right. And preparing to succeed.
Yeah.
And so I would love to know, I'm sure our listeners would too, do you remember the first time you were motivated?
Yeah, I was real motivated, and it goes to John's first point, the leader who motivates is self-motivated. I can remember, Tracy, 4 and 5 years old, leading. I'm all of 2022, I've been telling a story in all of our big events about how I wanted to drive a ship as a 5-year-old, and I would pretend my entire carport was this ship and all these people, and we were taking a cargo that was precious to faraway places, to people who did not experience the magnitude of the precious cargo that I have. Don't ask me what the cargo was. I can't remember. I just know it was very precious. It was very needed, and it was going to impact people when
Maybe
I got it there.
little Hot Wheels or something back.
Yeah, it might have been. It could have even been one of those little red hot things, fireballs. It could have been fireballs. I don't know.
Candy.
Yeah, candy. But all I know is I would sit on that imaginary ship and I would motivate my people saying, hey, I know we've been on the waters for 3 weeks now, but imagine the face of the people. I can remember at 5, 6 years old, motivating my imaginary crew with what it was going to be like to deliver our cargo. So I can remember feeling motivated at a very, very young age. I can remember motivating people, even imaginary people. I probably motivated imaginary people a little bit better than real people.
It's easier.
It is easier. Less resistance for sure. But I can remember early in life being motivated, and a lot of that came from within. I just had this passion within me that burned and exhibited itself as motivation. And I can remember after about 2 years of driving this big cargo ship, which was our carport.
This is imaginary or
This
is
is all
real?
imaginary.
Oh, okay.
Driving our carport, which was my cargo ship. And one day I'm standing on the railing looking out over a 20-foot drop, and all of a sudden a plane landing at Atlanta Airport flew over, and I went, why would I drive a cargo ship when I could drive an airplane, an airship, and get there much faster and take a lot more people? So it quit being such a precious cargo to now getting people farther than they'd ever been faster. Until about 9, and then the United States had the space shuttle program. And my cargo ship turned to an airship, an airplane, to a spaceship. And I soared into the world and took people to destinations they had never been.
I love that.
And so anyway, it's funny because I could tell more of the story, but today I'm not driving a cargo ship, an airship, or a spaceship, but I'm driving a leadership.
Yeah.
How about that?
I love that so much. Oh my gosh, why we love you times a million. I love that. Okay, so getting back to, so you're self-motivated. That's the goal. John talks about the leader who motivates is self-motivated. But then he talked about something that we should motivate someone with the right motives.
Yeah.
And so can you do a little bit of motivating right here to our audience? If someone is listening, he gave 2 examples that manipulation is moving people forward for personal advantage. And I would say that that's a temptation for every leader, because every leader is trying to get ahead, has personal goals and has their eye on certain goals. But then he says motivation is moving people forward for mutual advantage. So let's say someone is in our audience, and I'm certain that this has to be, if we're getting real with ourselves, as leaders should be. And they might have heard John say that, and there was that little bit of, in their spirit of, like, it is kind of one-sided. Maybe I am guilty of manipulating my people, not with bad intentions even maybe, but can you talk a little bit to our audience if they have found themselves that it's one-sided maybe, and how do they move that needle from it being just about personal advantage, of how do you become a leader who makes it a win-win situation?
Yeah, I think all of us that are leading things bigger than us, things that are more significant than us, we have manipulated people. So I want to start there because it sounds so bad. But I want to tell you this: if you're asking the question, how can I not manipulate people? How can I make sure that I'm motivating people? You don't have a manipulation problem. You have a passion problem, and you don't have people around you that can speak into your blind spots. Because all of us that are leading, will at times get so focused on our agenda, on our mission, on the thing that is so important to us that without even knowing it, without being intentional about it, we will begin to manipulate people to get to the accomplishment of our vision and mission. So start there. There's a chance. Those of you that are leading big things, leading teams, there's a chance that you might be manipulating right now. I'm not challenged with the fact that people manipulate. I'm challenged with the people that manipulate ongoing, consistent, and don't have checks and balances in their life. So I don't want to manipulate people. I hope I never do, but I do. Because the agenda sometimes becomes so important that I got to get there that I don't slow down and motivate. Now let me explain motivation. When John says motivation is moving people for mutual advantage, the only way I can know what mutual advantage is with questions. Right. Now, John goes right after that, motivational questions in his lesson, but stop right here. Manipulation, we all have a strong temptation to manipulate people at certain times when we got to get to the goal. We've got to get to the summit. But the way that you motivate people is you have to ask questions. You have to sit down and ask, what is motivating to you?
Right.
And let me tell you how you know you are being tempted to motivate or to manipulate rather than motivate. When you're doing a lot more talking rather than asking questions. How does that make you feel, Tracy, that we're going to go chase this agenda, that we're going to go get 100,000 people in the growth app? How does that make you feel? Oh, it feels good. It feels good. Sometimes I got to slow down and say, why does it make you feel good, Tracy? Well, I know that answer for you, I think. Let me try it for a moment. You are so passionate about women that are great moms and great leaders and have a passion for the world to embrace both expressions. You're passionate about it. And you want people that are passionate about family and people that have enough significance to be passionate about the family that they are significant in other areas too. So when I feel like I am over motivating you for my agenda, I slow down and say, Tracy, you do remember that on the personal growth app, you're going to be able to talk to more people about making relationships important in their life. And all of a sudden, I watch those lights turn back on in your eyes.
Right.
I watch you lean forward again and say, this is what I want my life to be about. Too many leaders that are casting too much vision, they cross the line between motivating people to mutual passions, mutual accomplishments, to manipulating people to their passion and their accomplishments. And so for me, as a leader that is very passionate, we just talked about that with my 5-year-old self, I've got to slow down and ask questions to make sure that people are getting motivated at their passion and desire level, not my passion and desire level.
It really is coming back to the relationship.
It is.
Which I love to always connect back to. It's knowing your people. It's you know that about me. You're able to say those things because you know that about me, and you also can know that I can lose motivation as somebody who you are leading into a new place because I can get distracted by other things in life, and it's connecting back of where we're going to the heart of what really matters to me and what matters to the people. And I know somebody needs to hear that because you can start to feel, and maybe you feel this way sometimes, that the people that you're leading and trying to motivate get distracted easily. And so it's a matter of connecting back because life is busy, life has hardships, life can distract our people. And when we're trying to motivate them, we need to make sure that we are connecting to the things that, through those questions that really matter to them.
Well, so recently sitting in the studio today is Jared Cagle. He's recently been named our Executive Vice President of Content Development.
Yay!
And so he texted me earlier this week at the podcast recording, and he said, Mark, I'm living my best life. He said, I just experienced a day that I could have only dreamt would have happened in my life. It was a perfect day. It had all these components. In fact, he was telling us a little bit about some of the components before we started recording. Here's my point. When you are motivating people and you're getting their best, an agenda of the leader can be accomplished, but it is much more gratifying as a leader to know that it's being accomplished on, in this case, Jared's terms rather than my terms. And I've left too many meetings, Tracy, and John Maxwell would say, hey, how was the meeting? I go, man, it was great. How do you know it was great? Because I really delivered my message. And he went, that's what made the meeting great? You got the message off your chest? A great meeting is when I deliver a message that awakens something in the person listening to the message and inspires them to go chase fulfillment of significance and success in their life because it's something they want to do. A great meeting is not always everybody rallying around my vision and my direction, but a great meeting is always when I can rally people around what's in them and what they want to accomplish with their life.
And that leads right into creating a motivational environment, a motivational meeting environment. But how do you gauge that? Like for that meeting when John would say to you, well, how great was your meeting, Mark? Or how was your meeting, Mark? How do you gauge if they were sparked, if the people sitting in your meeting were sparked, if they were motivated by what you were saying and connecting with that? How do you gauge that?
Well, it's a good question. I love this question. In fact, I'm thinking of a meeting that's coming up pretty soon to where I really have got to motivate our team for the vision that I have for the rest of 2022 and getting us ready for 2023. I'm starting to feel the intensity now. It's middle of October. I'm starting to feel the intensity of 2023 plans. And I've really got to motivate our team. What I've asked them to do, I just shot a video this morning before I came into this to record with you. I asked them to consider, I gave them an example of what success looked like from an event that we did with the vision we had for the event and for the organization. I said, here is the model of perfect scenario. Give them a picture of what success looks like. Then I asked them and I said, I want you to come ready to this next meeting with clarity on how you can learn from this picture perfect example that I've just given you and apply that to some areas that you are already connected with the vision or areas in your organization that you're part of the organization that you need to connect to the vision. Find what's going well or find something that we really need to work on. I think oftentimes we ask people, why aren't you motivated? But we don't give them a picture of what motivation or inspiration looks like. I think you've got to give a good model, a good example, and then ask them the question, what will motivate and inspire you to get to that good example in your world? And I'm trying that now, Tracy. Maybe we'll come back in a podcast next month or in a couple of weeks, and I'll tell you how it's going. But that's what I'm trying to do currently is create this motivational environment by saying, hey, this is what's working perfect to the vision with great culture and great momentum. This is what I would like for your part of the organization. How can you get there? What would it look like in your mind to get there? I tell you, of all the lessons John does, there's so many of them where I feel the same way I feel today. He practices what he teaches. He is a practitioner. I have sat on planes. I have been in probably more hotels, been in more cities around the world with John, in every kind of setting, every kind of environment. And I can tell you this, he believes in the power of sustained thinking. He believes that thinking has changed his life, and we believe thinking will change your life. I'm so glad, Tracy, that you're back. I'm reminded today, coming out of John's lesson, of Voltaire's quote. It says, no problem can withstand the assault of sustained thinking. I love that statement. I don't know if it's the word assault, which is like, I want to go after accomplishing something big, but I love that truly with thinking, we can make a difference. And with sustained thinking, we can change many of the things in our life. So Tracy, welcome back. Glad you're on the podcast. What a great lesson, right?
This is a great lesson, and I think it is going to detangle a lot of people from negative thinking, patterns of thinking. I know it did for me. The first time I heard John talk about this, it was like, and if you can't see me, if you're just listening, I'm like showing my head exploding. This was like mind-boggling because I thought there were either positive thinkers and positive thoughts and positive beliefs, and then there were negative thinkers and negative thoughts and negative beliefs. I guess I just had to learn that I really could control what I thought about based on what I nurtured. And when John talked about, our thoughts really inform our beliefs. Like what we believe is what we spend time thinking about. So if we have spent time thinking something for a long time about ourselves, maybe we've come into agreement with something that someone told us when we were young over and over and over again. And we are just in the habit of saying, I'm this, I do this, this is how I am. And that we've come into agreement with that, so we believe it now. And we can actually go back and say, well, we are that way because that's how we thought about ourselves. And so now we believe it. But if we now think a different way, we can believe something else about ourselves and then we'll act differently. That really was mind blowing for me because in my 20s, even in my 30s, and even now in my 50s, there are still things that I am assessing. What do I think about that informs my belief? And so, Mark, I'm curious about you, kind of looking back at your 20s and then honestly now in your 50s, a very, very young
Yes, thank
50s.
you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So in your 20s, clearly, were you somebody who had to detangle from what you thought about yourself in your 20s, that you had to change the way you thought about yourself to change your beliefs about yourself? And now in your 50s, even in this role now, are you still having to practice exercises of what you think about yourself in this new position, in this new huge role that you are carrying now in Maxwell Leadership, of carrying his life work into the next generation of leaders? It is so awesome, but it's also a huge responsibility. Are you still 50-something-year-old you having to work on your thoughts to inform a new belief about you?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely. It's interesting, and I hope this part of our podcast will be helpful to many. I wish I knew a little bit more of the science behind the paradigms that we have and the impressions that we receive when we're up to 5, 6, 7, 8. Science tells us that most of our thinking, our personality, is created in those formative years, and then the rest of our life we spend building on those paradigms, or we spend trying to debunk them. And it's probably yes and for both of those, that we really go back to. I know for me, I grew up in a very generous, very people servant environment. And there are times that I need to be thinking about the future and leading, as John Maxwell talks about. And I go back to wanting to win a popularity contest, rather than wanting to win a productivity contest.
Yeah.
And I go back to that people-pleasing concept that I think was impressioned upon me early on. That's good and bad. It's neither one. And to be honest with you, it is what it is. So to answer your question about leading in my 20s and leading in my 50s, yes, I am constantly trying to rework my thoughts for today's challenges. Isn't that true for us that are now leading past COVID? It was alarming in late 2020, the number of CEOs and top executives that was leaving corporate communities around the world, specifically in America. I mean, I think I saw a stat one time that over 1,700 of the Fortune 5,000 companies changed top senior leadership in the first 6 to 18 months of COVID. Wow. And it's staggering because it was causing us to have to rethink how we do business, how we motivate people. Well, then there's others of us, many of you listening to the podcast now, to where you were leading before COVID, you led through COVID, you're leading after COVID. And I have to tell you, even today, just before coming into studio, I was having to rethink leadership post-pandemic, post-COVID, because we now are leading different. We now think different. The social interaction of people has been shaped by 2 years of a pandemic. So yes is your short answer, Tracy, to say I am rethinking leadership. Between my 20s and 50s, I'm thinking differently. Between being the CEO and now the owner/CEO, I'm thinking different. By the way, I'm having to think different today than I did yesterday. I think this evolving of thinking is a reality, and I think we've got to evolve even faster than any of our predecessors had to evolve. Here is the biggest thing, Tracy, that hit me. John's first point was everything begins with a thought. Everything begins with a thought. And I wrote down on my notes as I'm listening to John teach, I hope all of you listening and watching the podcast do the same thing. I wrote down this question: do I spend consistent time, and do I spend enough time thinking? If everything begins with a thought, everybody just stop what you're doing. If you're running on a treadmill, jump off real quick. If you're driving down the road, pull over real quick, because I got a question for you. If everything begins with a thought, when's the last time you've had focused think time in your schedule? We focus on health. I love it. We focus on relationship. I love it. We focus on the next meeting coming up, and thank you for preparing. We all appreciate it. But are you preparing your future? Are you preparing the envisioned and excitable future of yours by focused thought time? I'm going to tell you, as I asked myself that question while John was teaching, I was not really excited about some of my answer there, and determined after this podcast to do better about scheduling think time.
I'm taking notes as you say that, because I'm thinking this is an action-packed world.
Yeah.
And we even in Maxwell Leadership talk so much on this podcast about being action-oriented. And so many of us pause too long and we wait too long to jump into the leadership game. But at the same time, you know, that what Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that he gave, life consists of what a man is thinking about all day. There is a running narrative in all of our minds that is playing and that we are listening to without even really thinking about. And so how are we making thinking time a priority? And if we are or aren't, are we thinking that's inactivity? Are we thinking like, are we just really taking the time to spend time thinking? Because what we are thinking about determines his next line, who we are. And so I just want to say to our listeners, if you are a parent, there is, you know, Mark just said, and I wrote the note, what he said, because it was powerful. He said his thinking is constantly evolving, but there are some things that are timeless, that don't evolve. There are very few things that don't evolve, you know, principles and laws of leadership. But then a lot of the styles and the way that we operate in those laws, those principles and laws, those are moving all the time in how we apply them. But there are some things that don't change. But with social media, they're kind of playing with the laws. They play with the things that aren't supposed to kind of move, some in some spaces. And so as parents, it's really important that we don't keep so active in busy work that we don't forget to monitor because our thinking determines what we believe, what our kids are listening to. Because John said, what we think determines who we are, and who we are determines what we do. So if our kids are listening to all this crazy wild array of different people, it means who we listen to matters. Because if what we listen to determines what we think, and what we think determines who we are and what we believe, we need to be really careful about who our kids and who we are listening to. And so I just want to say hats off to you, for those of you, so many of you who say, my kids, we listen to this podcast together on our way to school. We listen to this podcast while we're commuting home from work and school and daycare and whatever. This is playing in the car. This is playing in our home. I love that because it's starting so young.
Yeah, you know, as you were talking there, I went to that point that John made. What we think determines who we are. I was recently with John traveling, and I asked him, he had a big speaking day the next day. They had changed a last minute request on what they wanted to communicate, and it needed to be fresh. And we had this full day planned to where we were very busy. And I watched John be fully in the moment. He was just in the moment. And I said, John, if I had your load tomorrow, and if I had a new idea in front of new people that I had to communicate tomorrow, it would be constantly on my mind now. I don't know how to get my thinking under control to be present in the moment and yet be aware that tomorrow is a moment that people are depending on me to be prepared. And I said, how do you do it? And we talked for a few minutes about it, and it was wonderful. That night at dinner, as he does often, he come loaded with bear to answer my question and spoke into me in a way. I won't take this podcast time to talk about that conversation, but I will, because it will go down in one of the top 5 conversations I've ever had with John. Both of us in tears. He saw deep into my heart that night, because I was real vulnerable with him, saying, my thinking is still like it used to be, that I have to perform tomorrow for these people, rather than taking in the moment of today and sharing from today what tomorrow looks like. I wanted to share from preparation rather than experience. And John said, do you not know that you will connect with people greater when you are in the moment of your experience more than you are in the moment of your preparation? And Tracy, I sit there and I just went, man, I want to be synonymous with my thoughts. And then as soon as that word comes out of my mouth, guys, I go, oh, no, I don't. I don't like some of the negative thinking that I have to get control of to then live my life. And yet John is saying, whether you know it or not, leadership, podcast listeners, whether you know it or not, viewers, you are the sum of your thoughts. It is your thoughts are showing up in your behaviors, and most of us don't even know it. And then John began to communicate what he saw in me, and he said, Mark, what I see in you very rarely comes out in what you see in yourself. And he said, it's not because it's not true, it's because you are thinking incorrectly, and that's what's coming out of your mouth rather than what is. Tracy, it was brilliant in the need for us to get our thoughts in line with who we want to be, because whether we like it or not, we're going to be affected by our thinking.
And that shows, boy, that really spoke to me too, because it shows that we are always, that narrative that's talking inside, that sometimes it's negative and we're having to fight against it. And so when John said getting lost in the experience rather than in your preparation, the more preparation we do, spending time in our thoughts, and that preparation will show up when you're present in that experience. Whereas if you hadn't done the preparation, the experience might have been a little more tainted because you hadn't processed through your natural thoughts that you don't want to live in. And so I love that. I hope that comes up again, and that you can dive a little bit more deeper in. And you know, John always talks about layered learning. I hope that you can bring that up again and dive in a little bit more for us, because I know for me, that's a great lesson.
Let me do that at your invitation right now, because on point number 4, John says people who go to the top think differently than others. Right. Now, I know that my ascent to promotion in John Maxwell's organization, I know I was constantly going, I can get that done. I can do that. I would look at the people around me and I would go, I can do that. I feel like I can do that a little better. Not to be better than them, but I can learn from them and produce better because I'm in a state of learning. Right. And there was this constant assessment that I would do about production, discipline, work ethic, that on the trajectory, on the journey to the summit, caused me to think more positively than being on the summit and either deserving it or staying on the summit.
Yes.
So leaders, here is the point. We absolutely need to think differently as we move through life. It goes back to Tracy's first point. Do we need to be different in our thinkers? Do we think different as a 50-year-old than a 20-year-old? Yes, 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 yes. Do I think differently today rather than I did 2 years ago? Yes, 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 yes. But if the difference is an outlook, like if you get to the top of your game and then start looking over your shoulder or behind your back in fear, when all you did in the ascent was look forward in positivity and absolute belief that you could do it, You've changed the perspective, and you're not a negative person, but you've become negative because your thinking has changed based on your position of success.
Yes.
And what John is saying before he goes to the last point that we can change our thinking is this. People who get to the top think differently than others. Here's what that means. Do you believe you can get to the top? I hope your answer is yes. We're putting a lot of podcasts. We're over 19 million downloads now. We're getting ready to get close to our 200th episode. I hope we have helped you believe you can get to the top. Here's my other question. Do you believe when you get to the top, you'll see the next summit, or do you think that's the finish line? That's a thought. Do you think when you get to the top, now all everybody wants to do is to pull you down to the bottom? That's a way of thinking. It's incredibly important that we do adapt our thoughts, but it's just as important that we don't shape our attitude to be different just because we have arrived or we believe we can never arrive. And that attitude with which our thoughts are formed on is so important to leaders. And if we don't believe we'll ever get to the top, there's a 99% chance you'll never get to the top because your thoughts shape who you are. But if we get to the top and all of a sudden we now change our attitude from one of gratitude or hunger and now one of entitlement and satisfaction, we've changed the whole foundation of our thought process, and we don't even understand that we've lost our effectiveness because our best days are behind us. And so, Tracy, I want to go back, and I do want to wrap it up, although I don't want to wrap it up. I never want to wrap it up. I want to go back to this concept that we can change the way we think. And first, I want to hear you just give a little thoughts on what you took away from John in that, because he taught a lot more after he made that point. And then maybe a way or two that you change your thinking, because I'm trying to learn right here, because there's some areas in full candor, which I always try to do that with these podcasts is full candor. I need to change my thinking in some areas. And so how do we do this? How do we do this change your thinking?
Well,
Commitment, John
two
said.
things I'll say quickly. The first thing that he said really connected with me. And if you are somebody who is an empathetic person and an emotional person that's dealing with your emotions and your thinking, he said the number one challenge to thinking is going to be your feelings. Yeah. So if that really connected for you, then John is also an emotional person. I know Mark also has an emotional person that we're also trying to combat as we're trying to think our way through this. So John has given a tool that I think is so powerful. When you are dealing with a situation, he will say, you want to separate all of the parts of you. And you do that by asking yourself, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I know? And then what do I do? Because your brain kind of categorizes it all in the mush of you as what you know. So what you feel, you categorize as what you know. And so that's kind of like sorting out all of those things into different categories really does help you identify, what do I think about this? What do I feel about this? So that's two different things. What do I know is true? And you find that what you know is really a lot less because you feel a lot of more things than what you actually know in the situation. And then what should I do? Because he said, thoughts are a taxi. You get in and they take you where you want to go. And guess what, friends? If you are sitting in a taxi and you are stewing and brewing and having bad thoughts and you are believing things that you don't really know and you're identifying your feelings and your thoughts with beliefs, it was what you know, but you know, oh my goodness, this is actually just a feeling and I don't really know. Get out of that taxi and hail yourself another taxi. Yes. Bring in a new thought and bring in a new belief. And so that's kind of what I have taken John's advice to really try to work through that so that I can put on healthy thinking.
Well, and it's interesting that John said his first book, he said this in his teaching today, his first book back in 1989 was Think on These Things. You think about a life's work of 86 unique books, 119 derivatives of those 86 books. You think of 36 million hands have held a John Maxwell book. And you go, wow, all that started with the concept that you need to think differently to be successful. You need to think differently to make it about others. Think about that. Life's work began with this idea. Think on these things.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.